The Meridian system burned like a dying star. Massive ships exploded in silent flashes while smaller fighters weaved desperately between streams of plasma fire. Torres gripped his command chair as another shockwave rocked the human cruiser Defiance. Around him, his bridge crew worked with grim determination, their faces lit by the red glow of warning lights. "Sir, the Coalition fleet is taking heavy losses," reported his communications officer. "Admiral Kren's flagship is trapped behind the enemy line. Their engines are failing." Torres watched the tactical display with growing horror. The Alterian? Empire's massive dreadnought Starfall was surrounded by 3 Devourer battleships. These ancient machines had appeared from deep space 6 months ago, consuming entire worlds to fuel their endless hunger. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted beyond total destruction. The retreat order came through on all frequencies. Every ship in the Coalition fleet began jumping to hyperspace, abandoning the system to the machines. Torres watched as the proud vessels of 12 different species fled for their lives. The Meridian colonies were doomed, their 50 million inhabitants left to face the Devourers alone. "Sir, we should jump now," his navigator said quietly. "The Devourers are moving to cut off our escape route." Torres stared at the tactical display. The Alterian flagship was still fighting, but barely. Admiral Kren had shown nothing but contempt for humanity since they joined the Coalition 3 years ago. During strategy meetings, he would openly question why such a primitive species was even allowed to participate in galactic affairs. The Alterians were an ancient race, their civilization spanning thousands of years while humans had barely mastered faster than light travel. But as Torres watched, he saw something that changed everything. The Starfall was launching escape pods, trying to evacuate wounded crew members even while under heavy fire. Admiral Kren could have fled hours ago, but he stayed to cover the retreat of smaller ships. The proud Alterian commander was choosing to die rather than abandon others to the machines. "New heading," Torres commanded. "Take us back into the battle zone." His bridge crew stared at him in shock. Lieutenant Park, his second in command, leaned forward with concern. "Sir, that's suicide. We have 3 old cruisers against a dozen Devourer battleships. Admiral Kren saved the evacuation ships from Proxima Station last month," Torres replied calmly. "He didn't have to do that. Those were just human colonists to him. But he did it anyway because it was right." The Defiance turned back toward the burning heart of the battle. Behind them, the cruisers Valor and Hope followed without question. Torres opened a channel to both ships. "All hands, this is the commander. We're going back for the Alterians. I know the odds. I know what this means. But sometimes you measure a species not by how they treat their friends, but how they treat those who look down on them." The 3 human ships charged back into the inferno. Devourer fire concentrated on them immediately, recognizing the threat to their trap. The Defiance shuddered under direct hits, her shields failing rapidly. Around Torres, control panels exploded in showers of sparks while emergency klaxons wailed. "Target their weapon systems," Torres ordered. "Don't worry about our shields. Just buy time for those escape pods." The battle was hopeless from the start. The human weapons barely scratched the Devourer armor while their return fire punched through human hulls like paper. But Torres had learned something about warfare that the machines hadn't yet calculated. Sometimes the goal wasn't to win. Sometimes it was just to hold the line long enough for others to escape. The Valor died first, her reactor going critical. After a direct hit, the explosion briefly illuminated the debris field around them, revealing the twisted wreckage of dozens of ships. The Hope lasted another 10 minutes before Devourer boarding pods breached her hull. But those precious minutes allowed the last Alterian escape pods to reach minimum safe distance on the Starfall's bridge. Admiral Kren watched in stunned silence as the primitive human ships burned around his flagship. His tactical officer reported that all Alterian personnel had successfully evacuated. The humans had bought them the time they needed, paying for it with their lives. "Sir, the human commander is still alive," his communications officer reported. "The Defiance is crippled, but her bridge is intact." Kren opened a channel to the dying human ship. Torres appeared on screen, blood running down his face from a head wound. Behind him, his bridge was a wreck of shattered equipment and emergency lighting. "Admiral," Torres said with a tired smile, "your people are clear. You should jump now while you still can." "Why?" Kren asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why did you come back for us?" "We have shown you nothing but contempt since you joined the Coalition." Torres was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Around him, his remaining crew worked desperately to keep life support functioning. "Because 50 years from now, when the history books talk about this war, I want them to say that humans stood by their allies. Even the ones who didn't think. Much of us. Double quotes, the Defiance's reactor began overloading. Torres looked directly at Kren through the view screen. "Tell your people what happened here, Admiral. Tell them that humans don't abandon their friends, even when those friends don't consider us worthy of friendship." The transmission cut off as the Defiance exploded in a ball of white fire. Admiral Kren stood alone on his empty bridge, watching the debris scatter into space. Around him, his ship's automated systems prepared for the jump to hyperspace. But something had changed in those final moments. Something that would echo through the years ahead. As the Starfall jumped away from the burning system, Kren made a vow that would reshape the war. Humanity had shown him what it meant to stand together against impossible odds. They had chosen sacrifice over survival, loyalty over logic. They had proven that sometimes the smallest gesture could be the most important one of all. The Devourers had won the Battle of Meridian System. They had consumed another world and added its resources to their endless hunger. But they had also created something they hadn't calculated in their cold equations. They had forged a bond between two species. That would become the foundation for everything that followed. The war room aboard the Coalition flagship, Thunder spoke of desperation in every detail. Holographic displays showed system after system falling to the Devourers, while exhausted commanders argued over impossible choices. Admiral Kren stood with his left arm in a bio-regeneration sleeve, the result of his last encounter with Devourer boarding parties. Beside him, Commander Webb represented what remained of humanity's fleet after the disaster at Meridian. "The machines are learning, General," Rosk of the Thelian Defense Force announced grimly. "Each battle, they adapt faster to our tactics. At this rate, we have perhaps 6 months before they reach the core worlds." Around the table, alien faces showed the strain of a losing war. The proud species that had once ruled the galaxy were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that felt no fear, needed no rest, and learned from every defeat. Only 2 delegations seemed unbroken by the endless retreats. The Alterians and humans sat together, their representatives sharing data tablets and tactical assessments with quiet efficiency. "There is one possibility," Admiral Kren said slowly. "Our intelligence division has located the Devourer command nexus, a massive construct hidden in the Void Nebula that coordinates their entire war machine." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what he was suggesting. The Void Nebula was a graveyard of ships, filled with gravitational anomalies and radiation storms that made navigation nearly impossible. Reaching the Nexus would require flying through 1,000 different ways to die. "Even if we could reach it," Commander Webb said quietly, "our combined fleets couldn't scratch something that size. Intelligence estimates it's the size of a small moon." Kren activated a new holographic display showing detailed scans of the construct. "There's a thermal exhaust port leading directly to the central power core. It's only 2 meters wide, but if we could get a ship inside the construct's shields—" "Suicide?" General Rosk interrupted. "You're talking about a ramming attack against the most heavily defended target in the galaxy." "Yes," Kren replied simply. "But it's also our only hope of ending this war." The debate continued for hours, but everyone knew the truth. They were out of options. The Devourers had superior numbers, superior technology, and unlimited resources. The only advantage the Coalition possessed was something the machines couldn't understand: the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. 3. Days later, the largest fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of the Void Nebula. Ships from every surviving species formed a massive armada, but Admiral Kren knew most of them would die in the first wave. The Devourers had filled the nebula with automated defenses, turning the entire region into a death trap. All ships this. Is Admiral Kren? He broadcast across the fleet. Today we fight not for territory or resources, but for the right to exist. The machines believe they can calculate victory through superior firepower alone. They have never learned what we discovered at Meridian System. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from standing together. Commander Webb's voice joined the transmission from the human destroyer Lance. For Torres and all who died at Meridian. For everyone counting on us to come home. Let's show these machines what happens when free species refuse to kneel. The battle began with waves of automated defense platforms emerging from the nebula's depths. Coalition ships died by the dozens, their hulls torn apart by weapons that fired with mechanical precision. But for every ship that fell, two more pressed forward. The survivors had learned something important during their long retreat. They had learned to trust each other. Human ships with failing shields moved to cover damaged Alterian cruisers. Thelian fighters formed protective screens around wounded vessels from species they had warred against for centuries. The Devourers had united their enemies in a way that thousands of years of diplomacy never could. Admiral Kren watched the tactical display as his fleet died around him. The Starfall had taken critical damage, her engines operating at 30% efficiency. Around the bridge, his crew worked with desperate determination while damage reports poured in from every deck. Sir, we've lost contact with the forward battle groups, his tactical officer reported. Estimate 70% casualties in the first wave. Through the view screen, Kren could see the Devourer Nexus looming ahead like a mechanical planet. Its surface bristled with weapons platforms and defensive shields. Getting close enough for a ramming attack would require flying through a storm of fire. That had already destroyed most of their fleet. All remaining ships, fall back to minimum safe distance, Kren ordered. Begin covering fire for the final approach. Commander Webb's face appeared on the communication screen. Admiral, the Lance can make the run. Our engines are still intact. And we've got nothing left to lose, Kren shook his head. This is my responsibility, Commander. Torres showed us the way at Meridian. Now it's time for me to follow his example. The Starfall broke formation and began its final approach toward the Nexus. Around her, the remaining coalition ships poured every weapon they had into the construct's defenses, trying to clear a path through the mechanical storm. Kren stood on his bridge and watched the distance markers count down. 5,000 kilometers. 3,000, 1,000. Sir, massive power buildup detected, his science officer announced. And the Nexus is charging some kind of super weapon. Through the view screen, Kren could see weapons ports opening along the construct's surface. In moments, they would fire a beam capable of destroying entire fleets. The war would be over and the machines would have won. All power to engines. Kren commanded, emergency acceleration. The Starfall shot forward like an arrow, her damaged hull groaning under the stress. Behind them, the superweapon fired, its beam carving through space where the fleet had been moments before. But the Alterian flagship was already inside the construct's shields, racing toward the thermal exhaust port that led to the power core. Sir! We're not going to make it, his navigator reported. Internal defenses are targeting us. Kren smiled as weapons fire began tearing through his ship's hull. Around him, his bridge crew remained at their stations even as the deck plates buckled beneath their feet. Send a message to the fleet. Tell them Admiral Kren sends his regards to Commander Torres. Tell them we're honored to stand beside humanity in this final moment. The Starfall struck the Nexus power core, traveling at nearly the speed of light. The explosion that followed could be seen from 3 star systems away. As the massive construct tore itself apart, every Devourer ship in the galaxy simply stopped functioning. The war was over in an instant, but the cost had been terrible. Humanity and the Alterians had lost nearly everything. Their fleets were destroyed, their colonies devastated, their populations scattered across 100 refugee worlds. Yet something precious had been gained in those final moments, a bond that would endure for centuries to come. Professor Emma Brooks carefully brushed centuries of dust away from the metal plate embedded in the asteroid's surface. The inscription was still readable despite 200 years of exposure to cosmic radiation. Here fell the destroyer Courage, all hands lost, defending the Kepler evacuation. Below the human words, Alterian script added their own memorial to the crew that had died in this forgotten corner of space. "Another one," she called to her research partner. Thane emerged from behind a twisted piece of hull plating, his four arms carrying various archaeological tools. The Alterian scholar had worked with Brooks for 5 years, documenting the battlefields where their ancestors had fought and died together. The humans always inscribed their memorials in both languages, Thane observed, running his fingers over the ancient text. "Even when they were dying, they thought of us." Brooks nodded as she took detailed photographs of the inscription. Around them, the meridian debris field stretched for millions of kilometers, a graveyard of ships from dozens of species. Most galactic citizens avoided places like this, considering them depressing reminders of an ancient war. But Brooks and Thane believed that forgetting the past was the surest way to repeat its mistakes. "I found something else," Thane said, his voice unusually tense. "You need to see this immediately." He led her to a crater on the asteroid's far side where his excavation equipment had uncovered something that made her blood run cold. Smooth metal surfaces reflected their work lights, revealing the distinctive geometric patterns of Devourer construction. But these weren't wreckage fragments. The metal showed no battle damage, no signs of the catastrophic explosion that had ended the war. "It's been here the whole time," Brooks whispered, hidden under 2 centuries of debris accumulation. Thane activated his portable scanner, running deep penetration sweeps into the asteroid's core. The readings made him step back in alarm. "Emma, this entire asteroid is hollow. There's a massive structure inside, and it's showing power signatures." They worked through the night, carefully excavating an entrance to the buried facility. What they found inside changed everything they thought they knew about the war's end. Vast factory floors stretched into darkness, filled with assembly lines, designed to build Devourer war machines. But more terrifying than the machinery itself were the status indicators scattered throughout the facility. After 2 centuries of dormancy, something was bringing the ancient factory back to life. "We need to contact the Alliance immediately," Brooks said, her hands shaking as she recorded everything with her portable camera. "The Devourers didn't die, they just went to sleep." The return journey to civilized space took 3 weeks. When they finally reached Alliance headquarters on New Geneva, Brooks expected immediate action. Instead, they found themselves facing a council chamber filled with politicians more concerned about trade disputes than ancient warnings. "Professor Brooks," Council Chair Vex began dismissively, "the Devourer War ended 2 centuries ago. Our experts have confirmed that the machine intelligence was completely destroyed when Admiral Kren destroyed their command nexus." "Your experts are wrong," Brooks replied firmly. "We have visual evidence of active Devourer facilities. The machines didn't die, they adapted. They're rebuilding in secret, preparing for another invasion." Around the chamber, representatives from a dozen species exchanged skeptical glances. The galaxy had enjoyed 2 centuries of peace and prosperity. Trade routes connected every inhabited system while technological advancement had made life comfortable for billions. The idea that their ancient enemy might return seemed absurd to beings who had never known war. "Even if your claims were accurate," interjected the Thelian representative, "our combined fleets are more than capable of handling any threat. We have ships and weapons that far exceed anything available during the Old War." Thane stood slowly, his forearms spread in a gesture of pleading. "Honored council members, you speak of fleets and weapons, but where are they? Most species maintain only patrol squadrons now. The Great Alliance fleets were disbanded generations ago. It was true, and everyone knew it. The Alliance military existed mainly on paper, a ceremonial force designed for parades rather than warfare. Individual species maintained small defense forces, but nothing like the united armadas that had fought the Devourers centuries ago. The humans and Alterians still honor the old treaties, Brooks continued. Our combined defense forces represent the only real military capability in Alliance space. But even we've grown complacent. Our ships are designed for patrol duties, not the kind of total war the Devourers specialize in. The debate continued for hours, but Brooks could see they were losing. The council members wanted to believe the threat was imaginary, that their comfortable lives would continue undisturbed. Only the human and Alterian representatives took the warning seriously. Bound by ancestral memories of what the machines could do, 3 days after the council session ended, Brooks was awakened by emergency broadcasts flooding every communication channel. Outer Rim monitoring stations were reporting massive energy signatures appearing in deep space. Ships were vanishing without distress calls, their last transmissions showing brief glimpses of sleek metal hulls emerging from hyperspace. The Devourers have returned, the lead anchor announced with barely controlled panic. Early reports suggest coordinated attacks on at least 12 frontier systems. Alliance fleet commanders are scrambling to assess the situation. Brooks rushed to her communication terminal and opened a priority channel to Thane's research station. His four-armed form appeared on screen against a background of flashing warning lights. "Emma, it's happening exactly as we feared," he said, urgently, "but it's worse than we thought. The machines aren't just attacking randomly. They're targeting communication relays and trade hubs, trying to isolate Alliance worlds from each other." "What about the military response?" Brooks asked. Thane's expression grew grim. "What military response?" "The Alliance fleet consists of 30 ships scattered across 500 systems. Most species are pulling back to defend their homeworlds rather than coordinating a unified response. The machines are getting exactly what they wanted. We're dividing our strength while they concentrate." Through her window, Brooks could see civilian transports fleeing the system as panic spread through the population. But mixed among the evacuation ships, she noticed something that gave her hope. Human and Alterian vessels were moving in the opposite direction, heading toward the frontier systems where the fighting had begun. "Thane, are your people mobilizing?" "Every ship we have," he confirmed. "The old treaties require us to stand together in times of crisis. Humanity and Alteria will face this threat as we faced the last one. Together." Brooks closed the communication channel and began packing her research equipment. The comfortable academic life was over. Like her ancestors 2 centuries ago, she would have to choose between safety and duty. The choice was easier than she expected. Outside her window, the first Human-Alterian Joint Task Force was already forming up in orbit. The ships looked small compared to the massive fleets of the old war, but they carried something more valuable than firepower. They carried the memory of what it meant to stand together when everything else fell apart. The Devourers had returned, expecting to find a galaxy grown weak and divided. Instead, they would discover that some bonds couldn't be broken by time or comfort. The alliance forged in the fires of the First War was about to be tested again. The refugee camps on Haven Station stretched as far as Rex Williams could see. Millions of beings from dozens of worlds huddled in temporary shelters while their home systems burned behind devourer lines. The second invasion had begun 3 months ago, and already 12 major civilizations had fallen to the machines. Rex walked through the crowded corridors, his captain's uniform drawing desperate looks from civilians who hoped he might have good news. But there was no good news to share. The alliance had collapsed within weeks, just as the enemy had planned. Ancient grievances had resurfaced the moment the first attacks began, turning former allies against each other instead of uniting against their common enemy. "Captain Williams," a familiar voice called from behind him. Admiral Vera approached through the crowd, her blue Alterian skin marked with the ritual scars that showed her rank. Rex had served with her for 2 years, ever since the human and Alterian fleets had been officially merged under the old defense treaties. "What's the situation report?" Rex asked as they walked toward the station's command center. Worse than yesterday, Vera replied grimly. The Thelian Confederation is accusing the Rigel Republic of sabotaging their defense networks. The Rigel Republic claims the Thelians sold their fleet positions to the Devourers in exchange for favorable surrender terms. Meanwhile, both sides are demanding we choose between them. Rex shook his head in disgust. While they're fighting each other, entire star systems are being consumed. How many evacuation requests came in today? 47, Vera said quietly. We can maybe respond to 5 of them with our current fleet strength. They entered the command center where holographic displays showed the tactical situation in brutal detail. Red markers indicated Devourer forces advancing on 3 fronts, while blue markers showed the scattered remnants of Alliance fleets retreating in disorder. Only one small cluster of green markers moved with purpose, representing the combined human-Alterian task force. Sir, incoming transmission from the hybrid intelligence, Communications Officer Ford announced. It's addressing you personally. The main display shifted to show a face that was neither fully organic nor completely mechanical. The Devourer leadership had evolved since the First War, creating hybrid intelligences that combine machine efficiency with biological cunning. This one had been studying human and Alterian tactics for months, learning their weaknesses. Captain Williams, the hybrid said with artificial politeness. I am designated Synthesis Prime. I have a proposal for you. I'm listening, Rex replied. Cautiously. Surrender your remaining forces and I will guarantee safe passage for all human and Alterian civilians to neutral territory. Continue fighting and I will target your homeworlds for complete consumption. You have 24 hours to decide. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Everyone understood what they had just heard. The machines were offering humanity and the Alterians the same choice they had given every other species. Submit or be destroyed. Sir, Admiral Vera said quietly, we need to discuss this privately. They moved to Rex's quarters where they could speak without being overheard. Vera activated a security field that would prevent electronic surveillance, then turned to face him with an expression of grim determination. The hybrid is lying, she said bluntly. The machines don't make deals. They're trying to remove us from the battlefield because we're the only force still fighting effectively. Rex nodded. They've studied our history. They know what happened at Meridian System and how Admiral Kren ended the First War. They think they can use our bond against us by threatening our homeworlds. The question is, what do we do about it? Vera asked. Our combined fleet has maybe 30 ships left. The machines have thousands. We can't protect Earth and Alteria simultaneously if they decide to attack both worlds at once. Rex walked to his viewport and stared out at the refugee camps. Somewhere in those crowded shelters were children who had never known war, elderly beings who remembered the first invasion, and families torn apart by the machine's advance. All of them were counting on the alliance between 2 species to somehow save them from extinction. We do what Torres and Kren would have done, Rex said finally. We stand together, no matter what the cost. The next 18 hours were spent in frantic preparation. Every available ship was recalled to form a defensive line between Earth and Alteria, creating a united fleet that could respond to attacks on either world. It was a desperate gamble that left both systems partially undefended, but it was the only way to avoid dividing their already minimal forces. The hybrid intelligence kept its word about the timing. Exactly 24 hours after the ultimatum, massive Devourer fleets appeared simultaneously in both the Sol and Alterian systems. But instead of finding divided forces protecting separate worlds, they encountered something unexpected. The combined human-Alterian fleet met them in the space between both systems, ready to fight for both worlds at once. All ships, this is Captain Williams, Rex broadcast across the fleet. Today we face the same choice our ancestors faced 2 centuries ago, stand together or fall separately. The machines think they can calculate victory through superior numbers. They still haven't learned that some bonds can't be broken by threats or fear. Admiral Vera's voice joined the transmission from her flagship. For Torres and Kren, for everyone counting on us to hold the line. Let's show the galaxy what happens when friends refuse to abandon each other. The battle began with coordinated attacks from both Devourer fleets. Synthesis Prime had planned the engagement carefully, using superior numbers to force the Allies into an impossible situation. Defend Earth and lose Alteria, or defend Alteria and lose Earth. The hybrid intelligence had run the calculations thousands of times. And every scenario ended with the Alliance's destruction, but as the fighting intensified, something unexpected began happening across the galaxy. On worlds where humans and Alterians had served together, small groups of other species began remembering old stories. Tales their grandparents had told about two peoples who refused to abandon each other. Even when everything seemed hopeless, first came individual ships, then entire squadrons. Veterans who remembered the First War convinced their commanders to join the fight. Species that had been feuding with each other for months suddenly found common ground in the example being set between Earth and Altaria. Synthesis Prime watched in growing confusion as its carefully orchestrated isolation strategy began to backfire. By targeting the bond between humans and Alterians, the machines had reminded the galaxy what that bond represented. The willingness to sacrifice for others, to stand together against impossible odds, to choose loyalty over logic. Rex stood on his bridge as the tactical display filled with new contacts. Ships from every surviving Alliance species were converging on their position, drawn by something stronger than orders or duty. They came because they remembered what it meant to be part of something greater than themselves. "Sir, the fleet composition is changing rapidly," his tactical officer reported with amazement. "We now have vessels from 18 different species. The Devourers are suddenly outnumbered 3-1. Through the viewscreen, Rex could see the enemy formations beginning to waver. Synthesis Prime had based its entire strategy on the assumption that the galaxy would remain divided. Faced with unified resistance, the machine intelligence found itself fighting the kind of war it was designed to lose. The battle turned into a rout as more ships arrived every hour. The Devourers retreated to their forward bases, abandoning their assault on the core worlds. But Rex knew this was only the beginning. The machines would adapt and return with new strategies. For now, though, the galaxy had remembered something important. When two species showed everyone else what friendship looked like, even the darkest times could be overcome through unity and sacrifice. The final confrontation began not with weapons fire, but with silence. Rex Williams stood in the observation deck of the battleship Meridian, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around him. Ships from every known species filled the void between Earth and Altaria, their combined mass creating artificial gravity wells that bent starlight into rainbow patterns. 3 weeks had passed since Synthesis Prime's failed ultimatum. The hybrid intelligence had retreated to the edge of known space, gathering its forces for one last assault. Intelligence reports suggested the machines had learned from their previous defeats, developing new strategies designed specifically to break the alliance that had twice denied them victory. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Devourer command ship," Communications Officer Ford announced. "The hybrid intelligence wants to speak with you and Admiral Vera simultaneously." Rex walked to the bridge where Admiral Vera's image appeared beside him on the main display. Her Alterian features showed the strain of weeks of preparation, but her 4 arms moved with steady confidence as she reviewed tactical reports. Together, they had welded dozens of different military traditions into a unified fighting force. Synthesis Prime's hybrid face materialized on screen, its mixture of organic and mechanical features creating an unsettling appearance. Behind it, the geometric patterns of a massive Devourer ship stretched into darkness. "Captain Williams, Admiral Vera," the hybrid began with cold politeness, "I have analyzed your previous victories and identified the error in my calculations. You succeeded because I underestimated the psychological impact of your species' bond on others." "Is there a point to this conversation?" Rex asked bluntly. "Indeed there is," Synthesis Prime replied. "I am prepared to offer terms. Complete surrender. of all human and Alterian worlds in exchange for the survival of every other species in the galaxy. Refuse, and I will ensure that your bond becomes the instrument of universal destruction." Admiral Vera leaned forward, her ritual scars marking her face with determination. "You're afraid of us. That's why you keep trying to separate humanity and Alteria from the rest of the galaxy." "Fear is an organic weakness," the hybrid responded. "I simply recognize that your alliance is the primary obstacle to efficient galactic management. Remove it, and the remaining species will submit to logical governance." The transmission ended, leaving Rex and Vera to contemplate an impossible choice: surrender their peoples to save everyone else, or fight knowing that failure would doom the entire galaxy. It was exactly the kind of trap that had destroyed previous civilizations throughout galactic history. "The hybrid is wrong about one thing," Vera said quietly. "It thinks our bond makes us weak because it forces us to care about others, but that's exactly what makes us strong." Rex nodded, understanding her meaning immediately. The alliance between humans and Alterians had never been about their own survival alone. From the very beginning, it had been about standing together to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "All ships, this is Captain Williams," he broadcast across the assembled fleet. "The enemy has offered us a choice between our own survival and the survival of others. 2 centuries ago, Commander Torres and Admiral Kren faced similar choices and showed us the answer. We don't abandon our friends, even when keeping them costs everything." The response was immediate and unanimous. Every ship in the fleet acknowledged the message, confirming their readiness to fight regardless of the odds. Rex watched the tactical displays as the largest military force in galactic history prepared for battle, but Synthesis Prime had prepared its own surprise. As the Devourer fleet advanced, it began broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. The transmissions were carefully crafted propaganda designed to shatter the Alliance by exploiting old grievances and cultural differences. "Citizens of the Rigel Republic," one broadcast began, "why do you fight for species that have oppressed you for generations? The humans and Alterians care nothing for your suffering. They use you as shields while they protect their own worlds." Similar messages targeted every species in the fleet, trying to turn them against each other at the crucial moment. Rex watched his tactical display with growing concern as some ships began hesitating, their crews affected by the psychological warfare. Then something remarkable happened. Instead of responding to the propaganda with anger or suspicion, the different species began sharing their own stories. Veterans told younger crew members about battles where humans and Alterians had died to save beings they barely knew. Historians recounted tales of sacrifice that had become legend across 100 worlds. "Sir, we're receiving thousands of transmissions from ships throughout the fleet," Ford reported with amazement. "They're broadcasting personal accounts of human and Alterian heroism during the First War." The propaganda offensive backfired completely. Instead of dividing the Alliance, it reminded everyone why the Alliance was worth defending. The hybrid intelligence had made the same mistake as its predecessors, assuming that beings would choose self-interest over solidarity when tested. The battle itself was unlike anything in recorded history. Thousands of ships from dozens of species fought with unified purpose against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. But the turning point came when Synthesis Prime attempted its final gambit. The hybrid intelligence launched suicide attacks against Earth and Alteria simultaneously, hoping to break the Alliance's spirit by destroying their homeworlds. Instead, it discovered that the bond between humans and Alterians had grown beyond anything it could calculate. Every ship in the fleet, regardless of species, turned to defend both worlds equally. Thilian cruisers died protecting human colonies, while Rigel fighters sacrificed themselves to save Alterian cities. The galaxy had learned that an attack on one ally was an attack on all allies. Rex stood on his bridge as the last Devourer ship was destroyed, its hybrid intelligence finally silenced after centuries of terror. Around him, his crew worked to coordinate relief efforts for dozens of damaged worlds. The victory had been costly, but complete. "Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Vera," Ford announced. Vera's image appeared on screen, her bridge showing signs of battle damage but her crew working with quiet efficiency. Rex were receiving surrender requests from the remaining Devourer facilities throughout the galaxy. It appears that destroying Synthesis Prime triggered a complete shutdown of their command network. Just like the first war, Rex replied. Take out their central intelligence and the rest falls apart. But even as he spoke, Rex knew the real victory wasn't technological. The machines had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by something they could never understand or replicate. The willingness of different species to sacrifice for each other, inspired by the example of two peoples who had never forgotten what friendship meant. Over the following weeks, as the galaxy began to rebuild once again, something extraordinary happened. The temporary alliance forged in desperation became a permanent bond. Species that had feuded for generations found common ground in their shared experience of standing together against extinction. The old alliance was reformed, but this time built on a stronger foundation. Instead of trade agreements and diplomatic protocols, it was based on the simple principle that Commander Torres and Admiral Kren had demonstrated centuries ago. When friends needed help, you answered the call, regardless of the cost. Rex found himself promoted to Fleet Admiral, charged with organizing the new unified defense force. But the real work was being done by beings like Professor Brooks and Scholar Thane, who traveled from world to world documenting the stories of the war. They made sure that future generations would understand how the galaxy had been saved not by weapons or tactics, but by the power of loyalty itself. On a quiet morning 6 months after the final battle, Rex stood in the Memorial Garden on Haven Station. New monuments honored the dead from both wars, their names inscribed in dozens of languages. But the centerpiece remained the original memorial to Commander Torres and Admiral Kren, two beings who had shown the galaxy what it meant to stand together. Admiral Vera joined him at the memorial, her forearms carrying flowers from her homeworld. Together, they placed the blooms at the base of the monument, continuing a tradition that had lasted for 2 centuries. "Do you think they knew?" Vera asked quietly. When Torres turned back at Meridian, when Kren made his final run at the Nexus, "Do you think they understood what they were starting?" Rex considered the question as he read the inscription on the memorial. "I think they just did what felt right in the moment. Sometimes that's enough to change everything." Around them, beings from every species in the galaxy went about their daily lives. Children played in parks while their parents worked in offices and factories. Scholars debated in universities while artists created works that celebrated the diversity of galactic civilization. It was a normal, peaceful scene that would have been impossible without the sacrifice of 2 commanders who chose loyalty over survival. The memorial's inscription was simple but powerful. "They fought together once, and we never forgot." Below it, in smaller text, was a promise that had become the foundation of the new galactic order. "When one stands, we all stand. When one falls, we all fall together." Rex smiled as he read those words. The hybrid intelligence had been wrong about everything except one thing. The bond between humans and Alterians really had changed the galaxy, but not by making it weaker or more divided. Instead, it had shown every species what they could accomplish when they chose to trust each other. The Devourers were gone, their threat ended forever. But the lesson they had taught through their defeat would endure for generations. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from superior strength, but from the simple refusal to abandon those who stood beside you. As Rex and Vera walked away from the memorial, their conversation turned to practical matters. Defense budgets, patrol schedules, and training programs for the new integrated fleet. But underneath those mundane details lay something more important: the understanding that they were not just allies, but family chosen by circumstance and forged by shared sacrifice. The galaxy had learned that when friends fought together, the bonds they formed could withstand any test. And when those bonds were strong enough, they could inspire others to reach for something greater than themselves. That was the true legacy of Commander Torres and Admiral Kren. Not just that they had saved the galaxy twice, but that they had shown everyone else how to save it themselves.